This is Standard Office Procedures, the podcast that helps professionals live and grow through culture, communication, and candor. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Standard Office Procedures podcast. I am your host, Grace, and with me here in the studio today is a special secret guest. I usually have my dear co-host Shannon, but she is on vacation right now. She's at Disney World, having a great time. So Shannon, when you listen to this, I hope you are having a wonderful time. But today I have Melvin.
Hello.
Hi, Melvin.
Hi.
So Melvin, we talk about you sometimes in like an oblique way, and you've been a guest on the podcast before, but you're our editor, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like you are very intimately acquainted with the podcast.
I am. And so the first time I was on it, I hadn't been editing it long, so I was like hemming and hawing, like, oh, I'm nervous. Now I'm like, I have too much freedom now because I'm like, if I just say anything wrong, I'll edit it out. I don't care.
That's right. You can do whatever you want. You are truly the god of the situation.
So this is probably the most stress-free podcasting experience that one can have is like, oh, I'm going to edit this later. Who cares?
What liberation you're describing right now. I don't have that experience because you hold my fate in your hands. If I say anything dumb on the podcast and you're mad at me that day, you could just leave it in. So I have to mind my P's and Q's.
I did that April Fool's episode, which
so
will be out by now. But that was just for fun. I was like, this would be fun to do. And we were like, we can use this. So that was great.
It was really good. I'm glad that you mentioned that because if you guys want to hear probably the best episode of any podcast ever released, go to our April 1st episode. It's great. It's short. It's concise. It tells you everything you need to know about improving.
Yep.
So, but today we are talking about, I've got Melvin here and we're going to talk about mindfulness at work and being present at work and why it matters and how to do it. And at the end of the episode, or I should say the end, second half of the episode, we have a really awesome guest. It's my friend Erika. She's a yoga teacher at the studio that I teach yoga at. And she's going to tell us a little bit about yoga and just general mindfulness and being present. So without further ado, Melvin, let's talk about mindfulness in general.
In general.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about this because I looked at this topic. I read our blog post, like I skimmed it like a few minutes before this recording.
I love a prepared guest.
And I'm honestly sitting here and this is not what I had in mind when I heard the phrase mindfulness at work. Not exactly, but it's still on topic, but how would you define mindfulness?
So for me, so Melvin, as Melvin said, we base all of our episodes, as y'all know, off of our blog posts. And our blog post on this topic is great, but it's a lot of resources for kind of, if you're a manager, how to incorporate mindfulness activities for your team. And what I was really hoping for was a little bit more of an individual level, like how can I be more mindful? How can I be more present, quote unquote, during my workday? And what does that look like? And I have found that I struggle with overcommitting my time. And so I tend to have either meetings back to back to back or a lot of work kind of back to back to back, or I'm running from like one location to the other. So I'm never very present or mindful. I'm always sort of thinking about the next thing. Right. I'm not usually like, let me just really focus on the task at hand, or let me, set aside half an hour to be present and to plan and organize and look at my day and look at feel like I'm present in my body and appreciate the moment as it's happening, or just kind of, it's that living in the moment. And I think oftentimes when we hear the phrase living in the moment, we think of like this very spontaneous, carefree, like caution to the wind rom-com heroine.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that as it is like right now, if I wanted to be present right now, maybe I would like close my eyes for a moment. I would feel the table underneath my hand. I would feel the seat that I'm sitting on. I'm listening to the sound of my voice. I'm feeling my breathing. And I'm like, right now in this moment, even though I have 15 other things to do today, I am here in this studio with Melvin, and I can take a deep breath and exhale and be like, okay, now I'm a little more mindful and present.
Right.
And that to me is really being mindful and present at work. What do you think?
It's hard to do. And I definitely agree with that. But in our modern lives, I mean, you would know this better than me with like being a parent and in the director role that you're in, and just also, you teach yoga as well.
Please don't trigger me with all of the things that I do because I'm trying to be mindful
I'm attacking
and
you,
present.
Right. So, but you would know better than me that in our day-to-day lives, it's hard to set aside time to be mindful about stuff and be present and in the moment. And I, unlike you, a lot of my workload is kind of task-based. Like I'm a producer. I get to sit down and go, these are the things I need to do today. Let's do them. I feel like talking to me, you would probably... Like I think people would agree around us that I seem like a very mindful person.
You seem very calm. Yeah, that's
true.
Yeah, you're saying that you are very mindful, but I think the point that you're making, if you don't mind me cutting off a little bit, is that I think that you may appear very mindful, but just because you're kind of have a calm demeanor doesn't necessarily mean you're practicing the best mindfulness that you could be practicing.
That's a really good point. Some people are really, they seem stoic, or they kind of do have their day set up for them, and they have a lot of time for silence or to be calm, but that's not necessarily the same as being mindful. One of the things on this list is meditation, which I would say of all these things I have the most experience with. And even that, I'm not very versed in it.
Very consistent. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you're not mindful. So if you're somebody who's like, I was like a little scatterbrained, maybe you're spread pretty thin, maybe you have a lot going on, maybe your calendar is just like swamped, like back to back to back, whatever. So you really don't have any time for breathing or taking a second in between. Whatever the reason is, or maybe you're just not used to it. You're just not good at being mindful or being present. So what that tends to look like is you're just kind of always a little bit frazzled. You're always a little stressed. You've got anxiety. There's a big link to a lack of mindfulness and anxiety and depression. Maybe you also have like you're just frustrated with your job. You have burnout. So all these symptoms of a non-mindful, like non-present existence kind of occur. So ways to incorporate mindfulness in your daily life is to basically like take a moment and stop and take a breath. It kind of goes hand in hand with self-care. And we've talked about self-care and work-life balance and just kind of taking care, prioritizing your own needs beyond just food and sleep and things like that. You have to also make sure that you're getting your emotional needs met and your physiological needs met. And maybe that looks like taking a walk in the middle of the day, so you're not just sitting at your desk for 6 hours straight or whatever.
I believe you've brought this up on the podcast before, but would you say that one of the things it helps with apparently is like depression and anxiety? And do you think that's because when you go out of your way to be mindful, it allows you space to reconnect with yourself?
I think so. And it also gives you the space to appreciate what you've done, right? Like if you're always looking at all, like this is, and I'm speaking from experience here, so this is just kind of anecdotal. Everyone's kind of manifests differently. But I know for me, I tend to feel like a failure just constantly because I want to do all these things. And so I rarely stop and look back at where I've been. I'm just always looking forward and looking at where I want to go. Like I haven't actually published a book yet. I haven't, I don't know, like there's all these things that I want to do that I haven't done yet. And even though I'm making progress every day towards these goals, they're not here. And so I am a failure or, I need to do more. Or like there'll be things like little goals that I hit. And you mentioned that I taught yoga, which was nice of you to say, but also like a year ago, I wished that I could do that. I wished I could be a yoga teacher, but that just was so out of reach. And then I did it and I never even stopped to like be mindful and present and appreciate it. I just kind of blew past that goal and now I'm upset with myself for a different thing, right?
And you didn't take time to like celebrate yourself.
Not even a little. Like it was almost like this is what I was supposed to do. So I'm not going to high five myself for doing this thing when I've got so much stuff left to do. There's no time to high five. There's no time to be present and be mindful. And so I do think that that's another kind of risk of a lack of mindfulness or awareness of the reality of now is that you live in the future. And it's impossible to live in the future because you don't know what's going to happen. You can have an educated guess, but I would say 80% of the time you're wrong because of external factors.
Yeah. I mean, just look back in your life. How often have things on a larger scale gone exactly according to plan? Probably never.
I love that you're asking this in 2022 when all of us know for a fact globally that there is no predictable anything anymore.
So far out of our control.
Yeah. Nothing that you can do. So I just feel like a lack of mindfulness leads to that, can lead to that sense of like what's, kind of just this perpetual feeling of dissatisfaction. Whereas if you take a moment to, there's all kinds of, like you said, mindfulness practices. So let's talk about this a little bit. What does it look like to be mindful? And you already mentioned meditation. We talk about yoga sometimes. We've mentioned it here on the podcast already, but yoga is a great one. For those of us who maybe don't want to sit in complete silence and stillness for 15 minutes to meditate, which I understand deeply, yoga is a way to get very connected to your body. A lot of us, I think we are so in our heads the whole time that we rarely sit down and we like appreciate like what our feet did for us today. They carried us all over the place. What our hands have done, what our body is doing. And yoga is a way to kind of reconnect with your body. You've got meditation, of course, like Melvin was saying. And I've said this before on the show, and I'm sure I'll say it again. You do not have to sit down and meditate for 15 minutes your first time. That would be miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And personally, for a lot of these things, I'm like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. None of that sounds like me. Like meditation, what is that? kind of like stuff.
right.
Like I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I think what a lot of people like me may not realize is that your body probably forces you to meditate in times where you don't view it as meditating, but that's exactly what you're doing. Like a lot of time in my commute home, just in my car ride, like when I park or whatever, it's like been a long day of driving. I will sit there in silence for who knows how long, just like collecting myself and then being like, okay, time for the rest of my day.
That's mindfulness. So what you just said is a great example of, we do these, like you said, if we don't give our bodies and our minds what it needs, it will find ways to try to get it in other places. And so I feel like what you just described is like this, whether you were being intentional or not, you knew that you're like, I just need a second. Like between this thing and this other thing, between leaving work and going into this busy house, I just need a moment to collect my thoughts. And that's mindfulness. And if you're somebody who takes walks, maybe you take walks, maybe you listen to music, maybe you don't, maybe, whatever. But if you listen to kind of music and you're not super focused on the lyrics and you're just kind of thinking and you're zen in your own head and you're taking a walk or you're jogging or whatever, that's mindfulness. Taking long showers. My fiance does this. I think it's so cute. We have like a little bench in our shower, like little seats. He'll just sit on the seat and I think it's the cutest thing. And he'll just cross his legs and he just sits in the shower, like under the spray of the water. And I'm like, what are you doing in there? And he's like, I'm just like getting ready for the day. Like he's gathering his strength for the day.
That's his meditation.
That's his meditation.
Yeah.
There's all these little things that we do. And I tend to meditate during yoga. Like if I go to yoga class, and if I'm teaching it or if I'm in it, like I'll just kind of be a little bit zen there because it's very body focused. It's breath focused.
Yeah. I would say most people probably do it in the shower. A lot of people,
the shower's a
they'll
good
like
one.
listen to things in the shower or whatever. I'm not one of those people. Like when I shower, it's like the most silent that it is because I'm usually always plugged in. Like I'm listening to something, a podcast or music or editing something, or I always want something playing. And then in the shower, I'm like, I don't have any waterproof devices.
It's quiet
just
time.
Like, okay. And it's relaxing to say the least.
Yeah, that's good. See, so that's a great example of like meditation doesn't have to be clear a space, sit on the floor, crisscross your legs. It can be whatever you want it to be, that as long as you're kind of collecting your own thoughts. I will say, just kind of free thinking, like, letting your mind go where it's going to go is fine. And that's one way to do it. But if these are things that you're already doing, if you're already taking these quiet showers, if you're sitting in the car in silence and letting your mind wander or, whatever's happening, you can take it to the next level by intentionally, so being present and being mindful, by intentionally trying to think of your thoughts as just passing things, right? I love this metaphor of when you're meditating, you think of yourself as sitting on the edge of a stream, like the bank of a stream, and you're looking at the stream and it's carrying like rocks and pebbles and leaves down the stream or whatever. And each leaf is a thought. And so if a thought comes and it tries to distract you, so maybe you're trying to meditate, maybe you're trying to clear your mind and think about your breath, you're connecting to your breath and you're focusing on the cadence of your breathing in and out. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I was supposed to make dinner tonight. Okay, hold on. Let me think about what I need to get from Publix or the grocery store. And you're thinking and thinking, you can catch yourself doing it. And that's when you realize, oh, that was just a little leaf trickling down the stream. I'm going to let that thought go away. Like I'm just going to let that thought be carried away and I'm going to pull myself back to the stream and I'm going to focus on my breath. So again, if you're having these moments where you're being quiet and you're letting your thoughts run wild, I think that's good. That's like step A. Step B, if you want to take it to the next level, is being intentional about it and not letting those thoughts consume you. Because sometimes what can be a peaceful moment in the shower or in the car can turn into just like a little anxiety party with yourself, where you're just thinking about all the things you have to do and you haven't done yet, and all the ways that you're whatever. And
that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and if you just are a little more intentional and mindful about it, you can let that anxiety. You have the power. Your thoughts are not you, right? Your thoughts are what your brain is, the signals that your brain is sending, but you are the vessel and you have the power to say, I'm going to toss that one out. I'm going to let that one go down the stream. And then you can recenter yourself and be mindful again and be like, I'm going to have a nice shower and I'm going to think about either A, nothing, or B, something peaceful.
Yeah.
Did you like that meditation lesson?
I absolutely did. I've experienced, like I've learned it. I went to one of your yoga classes. And that was very fun. But my favorite moment was at the end where we were intentional. Yeah,
Shavasana.
And it was like, you play like some relaxing music and it was just like, okay, like let's be intentional about this. And like you said, that is kind of the next level.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's almost, because we can be kind of, if you're really productive, you're like, I don't have time to meditate, blah, 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 blah. But you can be like, there's a productive meditation.
Yeah,
right. That's what you're describing is like, that's the next level.
Yep.
So if you set aside time, like however many minutes, like 15 minutes, you can do like the first level meditation, like while I'm showering, while I'm kind of doing other things, thinking about stuff, or the next level, the more productive, which 15 minutes in the grand scheme of your day is like definitely worth it if you're going to get this return on investment.
And I will say 15 minutes will seem like a very long time if you're not used to doing it. And you can always start with 2 minutes.
Yes.
2 minutes. And then you can say, okay, I take a 15-minute shower. I want to be intentional, but I don't want to do it the whole 15 minutes because that seems like a lot, or that seems scary, or I don't know if I can do it. Set a timer for 2 minutes. If you have a little watch, you can set a timer on your watch, or you can set one on your phone outside the shower, whatever. But set it for 2 minutes and try this methodology where you're being intentional and you're like, I'm letting my thoughts go by on a stream. And then for the rest of your time, just do whatever you want to do. I don't know. What do you think about in the shower, Melvin? All kinds of weird stuff. Why are you smiling?
I'm smiling because I want to go, what if you don't shower? Then
hey, then that's a bigger problem. And as Shannon and I like to say, you should go to therapy.
Okay.
That's what I say to that. So there are some other ways to be mindful besides showering or not showering. You could also do something called a body scan. And this is a very, very typical not meditation, but like awareness, self-awareness, mindfulness technique that you can do anywhere. And it's exactly what it sounds like, whether you're sitting, lying down, standing up, whatever. You can take a moment and you can do, like, if you imagine you're in like an MRI machine and there's just like a light going from your head to your toes, and you do a full body scan.
Is that image is not relaxing to
Is
me.
it not? You don't like an MRI?
Yeah, oh no.
All right, think about another. What's a better image?
Man, I really just I came at your suggestion. I was like, no, I don't like that. I don't have anything better though. So let's go back to that.
But yeah, so imagine that there's like, you are scanning visually. You're thinking about the top of your head and you're scanning down and you're like, okay, now I'm hitting my ears and my nose. I'm thinking I'm hitting my jaw. And as you're scanning down from the top of your head all the way down to your toes, each body part, try to release it. Like any tension that you're carrying within your body, you can just kind of scan down and you release it. I know some of us hold our tongue against the roof of our mouth when we're on our computer, when we're scrolling on our phones. Jaw tightness is very common. Shoulder tightness is very common. So just like intentionally kind of relaxing all of your body parts. And that's kind of like a full body scan where you're saying, I'm being mindful, I'm being present. It's forcing you to acknowledge what the reality of your body is doing, what the reality of your feelings are. Maybe if you're very anxious, you feel like a tightness in your chest and you do that body scan and you take a deep breath to release that tightness,
Yes.
however it looks.
It's absolutely amazing. I think I had like a lot of trouble like with just getting to sleep when I was working like overnight years ago or whatever it was. And some of the advice was like, really try to feel your body.
Yes.
And I was like, what? And then I did it. And I was like, what's happening? Isn't
it crazy that you're like, this has been with me all day, every day for my entire life. But a lot of us are so disconnected from our bodies and the messages that our bodies are sending us. Like so much of everything is physiological, where if you're having feelings, you're probably having physical manifestations of these feelings, whether it's stress, whether it's joy, whether it's anxiety or fear, it could be anything.
It's all subconscious.
But your body is telling you, oh, your back is really sore. Maybe you're sitting weird in your chair all day, or maybe like you're just carrying a lot of stress between your shoulder blades. Have you guys ever had a massage? Melvin, have you had a massage?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like I feel like it's impossible not to be mindful and present during a massage. Like my mind just clears of everything as I'm being massaged. And one time I drooled. It was so fun.
That reminds me of something I wanted to mention earlier, where sometimes for me, absolute silence can be almost
off-putting.
Yeah. Unsettling to say the least. And it's, that's why I think this isn't unique to me. A lot of people, they need at least something to be doing to allow their mind to rest.
Yes.
Like when I would do like dishes or like mow the grass, even, I found myself being like very calm. I know that's not intentional.
But were you
like,
playing
meditation.
music?
Yes, usually.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be that. Usually, I'm just saying.
You just mean like the sound of whatever action you're doing, like the dishes. Well, I will say that's not wrong, but I will say that generally, if you're trying to practice, like if you're trying to create good mindfulness habits, you don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to take a walk and listen to a podcast, or I'm going to take a walk and listen to music.
No, because then you're focusing on those
you're
things.
thinking about your mind is now, it's distracted. It's taken out of the reality. It's taken out of the now. But like dishes or something like that, that's very physical and that's very present. So I would say that can count. I know a lot of people have very relaxing hobbies like knitting or crocheting or cross stitching or, coloring or drawing. I think in our blog post that we based it off of, we mentioned how adult coloring books are like a very good mindfulness exercise tool, where it's kind of, you've got a little activity like you're saying, but your mind is still kind of free to wander and think about things as you color.
Yeah, and for me, it helps for whatever reason. I can't really explain it, but it's not because whatever I'm taking doesn't take my full attention.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes 10% of my attention, and that allows me to free up everything else. Because if it's nothing, then I'm like,
it's too stressful.
It's too much.
Yeah.
What is happening?
So there's a way that therapists work with children that I'm sure you maybe have heard of or maybe experienced, but oftentimes when therapists work with kids, you can't just say to a kid, how are you feeling? The kid doesn't know, right? Like, or it'll say like, I say it. He or she will use very simple terms, or maybe they don't want to talk. And so play therapy is a kind of therapy that's used by therapists often to engage with children, where it's like, hey, let's get on the floor and we're going to put together this puzzle, or we're going to draw a picture, or let's play Jenga. And as the kid is busy doing, whatever the activity is, the therapist is like, so did you and your mom and dad ever play Jenga? And then the kid's like, yes or no. And the therapist, they start to talk, and the child is still focused on the activity, but also is processing this stuff that he or she is in therapy for through sort of like, it's like a little bit of sleight of hand there on the therapist part, right?
Yeah.
And we as adults can kind of do the same thing with ourselves, like Melvin's describing, where it's like, if you're kind of sleight of handing yourself, where you're like, oh, I'm doing this activity, but also I'm thinking, as long as you have the self-awareness and the wherewithal to not let your mind run away with anxious thoughts, and instead you can be more present. I think a really, really good exercise for mindfulness and being present, if you aren't quite ready to like completely clear your mind and just be super zen in the moment, which I get really, is a gratitude exercise. So you can think about, kind of like I was saying about how anxious people or relatively non-mindful people are generally in the future. It's a very, very valuable thing. Or you can be in the past, but in an anxious way, right? When you're thinking like, here are all the ways that I've messed up, which is unhealthy.
My God.
Yeah, which is, I think, another kind of the flip side of my coin, which I do that too, don't worry. But one of the ways that we can be present and appreciate our now is by thinking of all the things that we're grateful for. And you can do that while you're doing the dishes. You can do that in the shower. You can do that in a car. And that is an amazing mindfulness exercise that you can pair with a little bit of breathing exercise, whether it's your box breathing or you're just, your slow inhales, slow exhales, whatever. But just listing and then start really basic. Be like, I'm grateful for my health today, or I'm grateful for this car that I'm driving to work in, or the fact that I have hot water coming out of a shower. Oh my gosh, sometimes, Melvin, I trip myself out because I think about the fact that I'm very middle class. Like, I'm not a wealthy woman by any means. However, 300 years ago, the fact that I am able to have hot water whenever I want, that's decadent.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah, like
Bailey, my girlfriend, she always says water is so healing. Like, literally.
Yeah, she's right.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like, whenever I take a bath and I have hot water all around me, just at my whim, I can have a bath full of hot water, and then I put a bath bomb in there, and I'm like, queens of nations 400 years ago would be the only ones who are allowed to have this.
Yeah.
And here I am living in luxury. So that's a little bit of gratitude, right? That you can find in even the simplest things.
Absolutely. Just being able to if you do have a car, you have the ability to just go somewhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah. There are many things that seem simple. You're not necessarily taking advantage of it, but it's so integral to your everyday life. But without that.
Yeah, you take a minute we all do this, right? We take things for granted.
Yeah.
Where you're like, and I do this it's the worst when you do it with people, but that can happen as well. But I find that when I'm really being grateful, I'm like, man, I'm really grateful to have Shannon in my life. Or I'm so lucky that I get to be the mother to these kids. I think that's the one that I have to remind myself of, because being a mom, anyone out there who's listening, who's a parent, it's really stressful. You guys might not know that. No, but it's a lot,
what,
right?
Really?
I know.
Thought it was easy.
It looks easy. It's a lot. And so I do find that sometimes, I get frustrated. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's dance today, and then it's baseball tomorrow, and then it's all these things. But I am so lucky that I get to parent these kids. That's really cool, and I should be grateful for that and not frustrated. And I think reframing is another part of mindfulness, where it's that awareness in your own mind that don't let that anxiety and those negative thoughts run away with you. You can reframe, and instead of saying, oh, I have to take, Lucy to dance today, I can say, I get to take Lucy to dance today.
Yeah.
That's amazing that I get to do that.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. I can't speak to that. I'm not a parent.
Yeah, but you have relevant life experiences.
My younger brothers, I feel like I parent them a lot because there's a huge age gap between us. And honestly, this is such a tangent, but I'm a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan, and I have been for my whole life. I'm 23, and I've been a Sonic fan since I was a kid. But my little brothers, and my younger even cousin, who's 4 or 5, there's recently been a Sonic movie released in theaters. When I was a kid, I would have done backflips. Like, what? There's a Sonic movie? You know, and now I'm like, that's cool, but I get to take my brothers and they get to go like, okay, well, there's a Sonic movie now. That's just the state of the world. But it was always like that.
But that's really great though, because that is directly relevant to what we were saying, which is like, I think you could view it as like, oh, I have to give up my time to do this thing. And instead you're like, I get to do this thing. And how cool is it that I get to do this with them? And I, like you said, I would have loved for this to happen when I was a kid and they get to experience it. And so you have this unique perspective of gratitude about the reality.
And it's his like similarly, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, like Miles Morales, there being a black Spider-Man, that was so freaking
That's a big deal.
I'm like, that's a huge deal. It's, representation, it's a big deal, but that's a whole other thing.
And Spider-Man No Way Home, when he was like, I thought you would be black. He was like, you were from Queens and you had a mask. I thought you'd be black. And he was like, maybe somewhere in another universe there's a black Spider-Man. I love that line.
He said, Andrew Garfield was like, I'm sorry.
I know. He said, I'm sorry, man. Anyway, that was a tangent. But I think so. Being mindful, you really can do it anywhere. I think sometimes we make it out to be this bigger, scarier thing than it really has to be. Meditating for 20 minutes, if you want to do that, if that's your thing, go crazy. Yoga, of course, you know, extemporaneous things like that, things that you can leave the house and do to be mindful, those are wonderful as well. But you can also do it here and now, wherever you're listening to this. You can take a moment, pause the show.
Turn this off.
Don't turn it off.
Stop listening. Unsubscribe.
Just pause it. Oh, no. No, we're so close. No, just pause it and take a moment, and you can, you know, take your deep breaths, and you can do your body scan, and you can think about all the things you're grateful for. You can let your thoughts be leaves, all those fun things. But but think about all these things, practice them. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and switch over because we have an amazing guest coming on today. It's Erika, and she's going to teach us from a yogi's point of view how to be more mindful. Thanks, Melvin, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
You were a treat and a dream.
I want to be in more episodes.
Okay.
Can I replace Shannon?
Yeah, I think I'll put it to a vote. What do you guys think? Yeah, everyone vote.
2 people vote for me. Everyone else goes,
no. The Standard Office Procedures podcast is presented by Blue Summit Supplies. We're an online office supply store that puts you at the forefront of our focus by offering new career-building resources every single week. Sign up for our newsletter and visit our blog at bluesummitsupplies.com for free downloads, tools, and tips to make your job easier and more fun. All right, guys. So as promised, I'm back with our very special guest. I'm excited to introduce, I have Erika Bartlett with Zen Bend. Erika, you are a yogi and an entrepreneur, which I love to say. I love talking about lady entrepreneurs. And I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I love talking all things wellness, mindfulness. So I'm just excited to talk about it.
So kind of before we really get into the meat of the topic, which is being present and being mindful at work and kind of having that good balance of professional and also taking care of yourself in a mindfulness sense. I want to talk a little bit about your background. So you have Zen Bend and you have this company. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you do and why, like your passions, right? We're talking about mindfulness, and I feel like a lot of what you're doing is very much in that realm.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll give a quick little brief background. I've always been into sports, and stuff growing up. And I went to UAH, University of Alabama in Huntsville. And from UAH, I took my first yoga class. I needed some quick college credits. Who wouldn't want to take, a yoga class? So I went ahead, signed up for that, took it, and I loved it. Loved it. I stuck with it. And after that class, I just practiced at home, did YouTube videos, studied on my own about yoga. And after that, I just kept practicing. And what really kept me going was really the physical, but what I noticed was the mental aspects that I gained from it. And I just continued to practice. It kind of formed into something else. I kept saying, I want to do, a YouTube or get out and teach classes. And an opportunity presented itself, and I was able to finally fulfill my passion of teaching yoga to other people and all the amazing benefits that they can get from it, which the main benefit I felt like, of course, was the mental, because I'm a college student. Trying to keep up with everything that was going on in college was really big to me. So I didn't know how big yoga would be in my life. And now years later, I'm still practicing. I finally opened my own business, Zen Bend, and just trying to share the multiple benefits, not only just the postures of yoga, but the breathing techniques that you can use during the practice. You take that into your daily life, just the movement. And I do work at a desk now. So just staying calm and getting up a few minutes and doing a little stretch, a little walk around, has just really kept me to do it. And I love the benefits I got from it. And that's what just keeps me going.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of parallels between kind of our yoga journeys, if you will, to really use the yoga language. And I feel like I dabbled a little bit in college. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do this with my friends. And then I never really got super into it. I'm realizing this about myself. I'm a pretty skeptical person. And so people who are crunchy, quote unquote, is the word I use. I'm always like, I just can't relate. But then during the pandemic, I found, like you were saying, YouTube, I found a bunch of yoga instructors on YouTube that were like very much just kind of chill. They were my kind of people. Yes. And I was like, I'm going to start doing this because I can do it at home. Don't need a ton of equipment. And I was trying to get, quote unquote, in shape. I wanted to tone up. And what I was realizing, just like you were saying, was actually more beneficial to me was it wasn't that I was getting physically healthier, which I was, but what was way more impactful was that I felt calmer. Yes. Like I felt more centered and I felt more mindful. And, you have these moments of like forced mindfulness is how I used to think of it. Like, oh, I don't want to do the 5-minute breathing warm up, but I just want to get into it and do all the lunges. And at the end you would have Shavasana. And I admit that I used to like turn off the YouTube videos when they started Shavasana because I was like, I don't need to do this because I was always in a hurry. And then I started to actually do it the way that the professional was telling me to do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is working so well in an unexpected way. And so you mentioned a moment ago, all these benefits aside from the physical that yoga can bring. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about that. Like, can you tell us what benefits in this sort of more nebulous sense, like the mindfulness sense, that yoga has brought you specifically or that you've seen it impact your clients?
Yes. So the mindfulness is, of course, super impactful. It helps you to learn to live through your senses. And when I can tell a lot of people, like you just said, they'll skip the Shavasana or they don't want to do the meditation at the beginning of class. And I specifically for my classes, they're slow and gentle. So I make sure I incorporate, a little bit of meditation in the beginning and then a little bit of that in the end, because when we're busy, we're doing things before the yoga class, we may bring that with us onto the mat. And so doing the practice and allowing yourself to transition from whatever you were doing just before you start your practice, just slowing down, taking a few breaths, allowing yourself to find your center and just breathe. Your breath will always bring you back to your center. And I love to teach slow, gentle yoga because a lot of people don't like to slow down. I feel like now we currently live in a society where it's always go, go, go. And there's no, hey, slow down. Let's take a break here. Even just a quick 3 breaths and continue on with the next task that you're doing. And that's how you can build that mindfulness. I always do write things down. So that's another aspect that kind of came off of the mat for me and brought it into my life, because just trying to always manage, what you're thinking all the time, you can't always do that. So writing your thoughts down, whatever may come up for you, is really important, and just trying to add on and keep those benefits of the mindfulness.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So it seems like there are some very tangible things that you're doing kind of for yourself, like writing things down, doing this breath work. If you're thinking of, which I know you can relate to, because like you said, you do sit in a desk for part of your many, many jobs, many hustles. And are there any things that you do? You mentioned kind of taking walking breaks and stretching. How do you incorporate mindfulness and being present into your daily life? Because just like you were saying, you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head. I am very guilty of this. Like, I'm always busy. I think you and I have the same kind of overcommitting problem. So I'm always busy. And so I tend to be, if I'm doing one thing, I will be thinking about the thing after. Like I was just doing it a moment ago when you and I were setting up this podcast. I was thinking about the thing that I've committed to after this, instead of being really focused and present. And I was like, I realized the irony of that as I was like, I'm about to record a podcast about mindfulness. I need to be present right now in this moment. But I'm guilty of that every day, all day.
Yes.
So what do you do to combat sort of, that persistent future living where you're living in the future instead of the now?
I still do that too myself. And then I will catch myself doing it, or I'll catch one of my family members doing it. And I always want other people to call me out when I am doing that. So I can notice, because, sometimes we don't always look at ourselves. And so that's can be like, oh, you don't realize that.
Yeah. So what kind of practices do you incorporate into your day-to-day, like tangible things that if I'm listening to this and I'm like, I don't even know where to start with mindfulness, what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to be a little more mindful in, whether at the office or at home?
Okay. Yes. So to be more mindful, I would say finding a routine, if you do not already have one, a morning routine. Some people may just get up, grab their clothes, throw them on, grab your things, and run out the door. It does not set you up for a good, successful, and productive day. And I can attest to that because I've done it to myself several times. And, sometimes we get in that crunch and we just have to go. But if you can really take the time to get you a morning routine, if you drink tea or coffee or water, whatever it is, wake up, give thanks for your day, drink your drink, and take a shower, whatever it is to help you kind of set steps. So your routine is basically steps to prepare you for your day. And you can do the same thing throughout the rest of the day. Like I said, I write so many things down, and checking things off of your list can also help with that. So just creating a routine that helps for you. Maybe find an activity when you do have a few minutes of a break, whether that's yoga, a few breaths that you take, and just trying to change the way that you think about what you have to do. Instead of, oh, I have to get up and I have to go do this. Maybe, oh, yes, I get to get up and go do X, Y, and Z. And then just give thanks. I'm thankful that I get to go do this. Although I'm not really feeling the best, I'm thankful that I have my body, I have my breath, and I can still go do it. Just trying to change your perspective of how you think about the things that you're doing, like your regular tasks that you do, get yourself ready, tasks that you do during the day, maybe at work. If you have kids, maybe there's tasks for that too, which it can get overwhelming. So just trying to write it all out. As soon as you have a thought, just jot it down. I do have like an overwhelmingly amount of sticky notes, but as soon as you finish with that sticky note, you've checked it off your list, just toss that sticky note out and just continue with the things that you've done. And that'll continue to help you build that mindfulness practice, just writing it down, create a routine, maybe in the morning, midday, catch your break. And then in the evening, how we end our day is also important as well. So if you like to take a bath or a hot shower, just make sure that you do those things. You eat something that makes you happy, and just try to be mindful as you do those things, as you're eating. I'm thankful I get to eat my favorite meal today. Or if you are having your favorite drink, I love this drink and I'm glad that I can make it for myself, or I'm glad that I could go and to a certain restaurant and get that, because even the smallest things can be a huge impact for your life, and just turning into your gratitude honestly has been the biggest thing for me to keep up with my mindfulness. Just, I know it sounds crazy, but I am grateful that I get to brush my teeth with water, a toothbrush, and toothpaste today. It sounds cheesy, but some people don't even get that opportunity to do that for themselves. So just be thankful for everything that you get to do for yourself and share that with others. And that just continues the mindfulness, I feel like.
You said a couple of things in there that I really loved. And you used the word overwhelming, which I thought was just applicable in all senses of the